class, welcome back. So the other day I was having a conversation with my friends, Mr. and Mrs. Otterson, and I asked them, how are you two so good at back swimming? Where did you learn? And they told me about this grand adventure they went on in order to learn how to back swim. And so they actually gave me the map that they used and all the stops that they made in order to learn. So today we are going to go through the map and learn how to back swim. Mr. and Mrs. Otterson said that the very first step was here with Mr. Sailboat. Mr. Sailboat floats just like people can float and just like otters can float. A back float, which is what we're learning today, looks something like this. Mr. Sailboat tells us to remember the 3 P's. The first P includes placing your head back, which puts your chin up and you look up at the sky. The second P is pushing your belly up towards the sky instead of sinking back and letting your butt go back. And the third P is to paddle your free hands while you float. Mr. Sailboat wants us to remember that it's very important to relax while you're floating. It's a lot harder to float when you're all tightened up. Now, when you're coming out of the float, all you must do is bend your legs and put your feet back down so that they touch the ground. Next, Mr. and Mrs. Otterson met the bird. The bird taught us about gliding because the bird glides through the air just like otters and people can glide through the water. So I want you to think back to your Spanish class because I know that your teacher taught you that the Spanish word for fish, which fish can glide through the water as well, is pez. So when we think of gliding, we want to think of PEZ. The P is for push because we're pushing off of the ground or the wall, whatever it is. Then we're going to extend our legs forward and then we zoom through the water and that's how we glide. This person is zooming through the water and gliding with their arms up above their head. This person is a little bit more relaxed, but they are both gliding properly. When we glide, it's very important that we remember our floating form. After that, Mr. and Mrs. Otterson met the tree. The tree teaches us that the arms, just like their branches, can help them balance. Our arms can help us balance while we're floating on our backs by being free, like our cue from earlier, and moving about as our body moves. Or we can use our arms to help us swim through the water. I will show you 2 different ways that you could use your arms while swimming. First could be called the windmill because your arms go in a circling motion. It includes, like the visual here, swimming on your back. One arm is up and the other one is back. So you lift this arm up and reach back. Lift the other arm up and reach back. In this one, the arms will alternate. In what I like to call the swirl, we're also on our back because that's what our lesson is. This includes the arms bending, extending, and circling back. This motion goes over and over as the arms are moving simultaneously. After that, Mr. and Mrs. Otterson met 2 different friends to help them with legs. In order to use your legs best while we're kicking, we learn from Mr. Moose and Mr. Frog. Now, when we're kicking, we can kick like Mr. Moose might kick, which is what I like to call the motor. That includes bending at the knee and extending one leg at a time. So these will alternate. So you will bend and extend. That's what you should think as you go. Now, Mr. Frog might kick a little bit differently. His legs are different, so he can kick his legs out, back, and then back around. Out, back, and then around. That's what Mr. Frog says while he swims. Luckily, everyone in our classroom is a person, so we get to choose which one we want to do. If we do the motor, we want to make sure that our toes are pointed and our kicks are fast and strong. If we do the frog, we want to make sure that our toes are pointed as well, but the snap comes from the back and around part. After meeting the frog and the moose, Mr. and Mrs. Otterson were finally done. They had learned how to float from the sailboat. They learned how to glide from the bird. They learned about their arms from the tree, and they learned about the legs from the frog and the moose. So now, as we continue our lesson and we get into the pool, I want you to remember the lessons that Mr. and Mrs. Otterson taught you from their journey.